Hello everyone. So we're now talking about setting today. Setting is the information about where a work of literature takes place. Where is this thing happening? Okay, where's this a short story happening? The novel, the play, whatever that constitutes as what you're reading. There can be three different elements of setting, and likely more, but the three that we're going to focus on today are going to be time period. So when is this short story happening? Geographic location, where broadly, and then immediate surroundings. What is happening in the close space around the narrator or the speaker or whoever is involved. So we've got our time period. What does that mean? Well, we know the story of an hour was written in the late 1800s. So we can assume, since there's no information about the date, that it's probably happening right around that same time. We can kind of get those clues also from the way that people are speaking and from the situations that are arising, right? So it matters that the story is taking place in the late 1800s because it brings this sort of overall context that we might not have otherwise if we don't think about it, right? If we think about the story of an hour happening in 2020, we're going to think it's probably weird. We're going to think that, something's not quite right. It doesn't make sense. And the reason for that is that we have a different contextual space. And that's okay. But we need to keep in mind that contextual space that we have. All right. So the other thing that we need to focus on is geographic location. Okay? If there is any indication of where something is taking place in the world, we want to keep that in mind. It might be something as simple as, someone saying that, or one of the characters saying that it's hot out, or saying that it is cold out, because those can give us little hints and clues about what's coming up in the story as well, right? So that's a way that the setting can kind of, work together with the rest of the story. It also could involve immediate surroundings. So what does that mean? Well, Louise Mallard locks herself in her room, so that becomes her setting for that part of the story, right? So we know that she's locked in this room, she's by herself, even though someone else may want to get in, right? She's in there by herself, and what does she do to open herself up to the world? Well, she opens a window, right? So we need to think about the things that are happening inside this story, and we need to think about what's happening inside this room, and then we need to think about what's happening outside the room, right? All of these things work together to help convey the information in the story. Now, we do this all the time, right? We can think, okay, so, let's look at this picture here. What do you know about this house and where it's located? Well, if you want to pause and kind of think about it a little bit, you can totally do that. I'm just going to dive right in and kind of tell you what I get from this, right? This is an old house. It's rustic. We are somewhere in the country. I pass houses that look like this on my way into work, right? So, we can think of this in that context. This is out in the country. This isn't something that people are going to drive past all the time unless they live out in the country as well. You can see that there's, it looks like maybe some barbed wire fencing. So that kind of gives it a little bit of an ominous feeling, like maybe people have tried to get in the house before, maybe, I don't know, to seek shelter or to do whatever it is that people do when they sneak into abandoned houses. You can see that it's missing windows, so it's probably been vacant for a very long time. The aluminum roof is about to fall off, and parts of it have, so we know it hasn't been treated. So this is a desolate home that hasn't been utilized to its best potential in a very long time, right? So if a story is taking place here, we can assume that there's probably going to be something creepy going on, because loneliness, being alone, right? All of this stuff kind of leads into this mysterious type of feeling, right? This type of tone, and you want to keep that in mind as you're reading. If you get a story that's discussing a setting like this, then you know what is happening, right? You have a hint, and you want to make sure that you utilize that hint. So the other thing that you want to think about is, how does what we're seeing in the setting interact with your piece of literature? So what is the fact that, this character or this situation is located in this particular space, right? If it's something that takes place in the middle of the woods, well, we've got some indications that, there's maybe some danger, right? Because when people are alone, there's the potential for danger because you can't get help if you can scream, no one can hear you, right? This idea. If it takes place in a city that's described as a thriving metropolis, you know that people are going to be bustling around. There's always going to be someone around to listen and hear and see. Listen and hear are the same thing, but roll with it. But the thing is, at that point, there's a whole different alone as well, right? Because in a city, people are all focused on their situation, right? They don't necessarily look out and see what other people are going through. So just because you're in a space that's surrounded by people doesn't necessarily mean that you're not alone, right? So you want to think through all of these things. If something takes place in a world blanketed by snow, well, you know that this is also a different and very, very, very special, I guess. Maybe this is betraying my northernness, but it's a special kind of alone, because the space when the world is blanketed by snow and when it's snowing is so quiet, right? It's almost like you could hear a pin drop, but also you can't at the same time, right? It's such an absurd kind of quiet. And when it's blanketed by snow, typically it's not overly cold, right? So this is more of a nice space to be in. Again, betraying my northernness, but snow it creates this distance between people, unless you're literally right next to each other enjoying it at the same time. That type of alone happens as well, right? So each of these three situations, even though they're very different, can bring that feeling of loneliness into a story, right? So you want to think about it and dig through, and keep asking yourself why. Why is the important question in literary analysis? So you want to make sure you keep asking why. Why is it that the author chose this particular thing? Why is it that this story is located here? I had a teacher in 11th grade, and we had a student in class who asked, well, what happens if the reason that there's a tree outside a window in a story is because the writer looks out the window and sees a tree? And my teacher, she was kind of mean. She was a little cranky. Not gonna lie, I didn't really love her that much. But she looks at the student and just says, well, then they're not a good author. And as I grow, I realize that that is partially true, right? Everything in a story is there for a reason. It's thought through carefully. So make sure you, as a reader, take time to think about, especially since we're talking about setting, what this particular setting means for the story, okay? Because it's not there on accident. It's there for a reason.